Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aline McNall, and I'll be doing today's Washington update from the IEEE-USA's Washington office. Feel free to ask questions in the chat at the end. I will try and answer them. Also, if any of you are watching this after it's already been recorded, you can feel free to ask questions by email or send your comments by email. Thank you. So an update on appropriations. Negotiations are underway between the House and the Senate. Both have introduced their versions of the different bills. This week, I'll be talking about the Commerce, Justice, and Science bill in terms of appropriations. And next time for the legislative update, I'll focus on the Energy and the Defense and Water, or the Energy and Water and the Defense bill. So in terms of the House appropriations, the top line for NSF is $9.5 billion in the Senate and $9.63 billion in the House. In the research and related activities account, which would include many of our different directorates that fund a lot of research from IEEE members, $8.32 billion in the Senate and $7.87 billion in the House. The major research equipment and facilities account, there's a little bit of a difference here in terms of kind of the issues that the NSF face and the conversations that they've had with House and Senate. And so we do see a little bit of a difference in terms of the funding levels. I'm sorry, the NSF does give a unified message to both sides of Congress, but the kind of discussions within the House and the Senate led to some pretty big differences in this particular account. In the Senate appropriations bill, there is discussion about emergency supplemental funding, and this is starting to carry over in House discussions that we have had as well. And so this would lead to kind of a set pot of money for the science agencies. So in this case, it would be NSF, NIST, and NASA in this bill. So there is currently this debate about what are we going to do about the fact that the CHIPS Act dumped a lot of money into these agencies, and realistically, our federal budget discussions don't necessarily allow for all of that funding to become part of this year's funding discussions. And so this is where the debate of the emergency supplemental funding comes in. So those are ongoing, and we look forward to weighing in as Congress debates the funding levels of NSF, NIST, and NASA moving forward. Comparison of NIST funding. So the NIST total in the House is $1 billion, and then in the Senate it's a little bit under $1 billion. The Scientific and Technical Research Services account was not specified in the Senate bill, but was specified in the House bill. In terms of industrial technology services, there's not much difference in the House and the Senate. Except a few $1 million there. And then the construction account does differ quite a bit. NIST construction has been a topic of debate in the House and the Senate for quite some time in terms of kind of their infrastructure needs and their maintenance backlog. The maintenance backlog at NIST is a huge percentage of the funding of the overall agency. And so what is Congress going to do about that has certainly been an issue of debate with the appropriations committees. Quick overview of NASA funding. There's a couple of differences in terms of the funding amounts of the Science Directorate. We see a little bit closer funding in terms of aeronautics. The Space Technology Directorate is fairly close. And then the Exploration Directorate is also fairly close, though there are a couple differences in terms of how House and Senate appropriators do deal with NASA funding. And then, of course, we have the Space Operations budget, which is fairly close. And so we look forward to kind of watching the compromise go forward. In terms of kind of overall funding discussions in the House and Senate, we are considering the possibility of a continuing resolution later this fall in terms of funding the federal government. But right now, the predictions are that the federal government would in fact shut down because a pretty significant portion of funding debates are kind of, we're seeing two different sides of the fence. And so there's not a lot of agreement right now in terms of funding outside of the STEM agencies in particular. So we look forward to working with Congress and hoping to continue the funding of the federal government and not see a shutdown. That would, of course, drastically affect many of our members. But we are hopeful that an agreement can be made and that we can all move forward with funding the federal agencies. Moving on to some just agency level news. There's a NIST NSF Disaster Resilience Symposium that will be held in late August. Registration is free and it is a virtual event. So for those of you who are interested, I would feel free to go onto the agency websites to register for the event. NSF news. So NSF has selected 16 teams as finalists for the first ever NSF Regional Innovation Engines competition. So there's a range of key technologies areas that NSF has been focused on, particularly as those came up in the CHIPS Act. But they're looking at addressing societal challenges and economic challenges. And so these NSF engines would link up with local and regional partners to expand innovation across the United States. They would also look to create collaborations and inclusive technology-driven innovation ecosystems. So we look forward to watching these engines really help our economy in all geographic areas of the country. And NSF has certainly been an agency that IEEE has worked well with in the past, and we look forward to looking at kind of how these regional innovation engines will help our members in all areas of the country. So IEEE did respond to NSF's request for information on the new directorate called TIP, which was set out, and we responded last week. So IEEE did provide this input to the agency, and we look forward to working with the TIP directorate staff. So some of our recommendations, including that TIP should utilize the resources of network of community colleges throughout the U.S. To build this regional innovation capacity. Obviously, we have our R1s and our prominent research institutions throughout the U.S., but there is a network of community colleges that could be better utilized by this new directorate looking to build innovation engines throughout the country, but also innovation kind of ecosystems and hubs where the innovation could really help local communities as much as possible. And so our suggestion was to really look at community colleges in that sense. We were also looking at kind of the differences between the NSF key technology areas and, for example, the Department of Defense has key technology areas, and there's a lot of overlap. Those lists are very similar. And so our suggestion to the TIP directorate would be to work across federal agencies to address these issues relating to the key technology areas and to see what collaborations can happen between the NSF, but also the other agencies that are looking at these key technology areas. And then we also recommended that the TIP directorate should work specifically with NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, as well as the Manufacturing USA Institutes, to build this regional innovation capacity. NIST has done a really good job through their Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program to build kind of connections with the business community and with the STEM community throughout the U.S. There is a Manufacturing Extension Partnership Office in each state, of course. And so for the NSF to kind of piggyback on that, as TIP looks to really build innovation throughout the United States from a geographic perspective, our suggestion to them would be to partner with NIST and to look at what NIST has already done to see where they can build. A quick update on the CHIPS Act. So the Department of Commerce and Department of Defense have signed a memorandum of agreement to strengthen the U.S. industrial base. So the CHIPS Act was largely a non-defense bill. However, obviously semiconductors and the work that the CHIPS Act, offices that worked on the CHIPS Act focused on semiconductors, those obviously are very important to the defense community. And so this memo aims to increase the resilience of our domestic semiconductor industrial base and also strengthen the collaborations on potential investments and applications to ensure that both the Department of Commerce and the Department of Defense are maximizing the federal investments under the CHIPS Incentive Program, but also the DoD Defense Production Act. So we look forward to keeping an update on CHIPS as it moves forward. A lot of members of IEEE are certainly benefiting from the policy changes in that act, and we'll keep you updated. But that was a quick update from the Department of Commerce as it relates to the CHIPS Act. IEEE did send a letter to the House Judiciary Committee about the Pro Codes Act. So we looked at suggestions relating to standards development. And then for those of you who are interested in kind of seeing this letter and seeing our policy actions, I wanted to point you to the policy log on the IEEE-USA website, which does contain a copy of the letter we sent to Congress on the Pro Codes Act, but also other correspondence that we have with federal agencies and with Congress. When we do send letters, we post them there to show our members kind of what we're doing for you all. And so a copy of the Pro Codes Act letter is on our policy log, and I do suggest that any of you who are interested in reading the letter look to our website. Speaking of letters, the Keep STEM Talent Act was one that was supported by IEEE-USA. So S2384, for those of you who are interested in the bill number, aims to enhance global competitiveness and improve STEM talent across American universities. And IEEE was a strong supporter of that bill. This letter is again available on our policy log. For those of you who are listening live, I will now take questions, comments, or any wise remarks you might have. Looking forward to a good discussion today. Seeing no questions, I'll close out today's program, but I hope you all have a good next 2 weeks, and I will see you on August 17th. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
I had the coolest job that any electrical engineer could ever have on the ground crew for Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world only using the power of the sun. IEEE-USA has given me a competitive edge because of their support system. It is so much easier doing something and being out of your comfort zone when you have someone there saying, "You got this." IEEE-USA is more than just a network. It's a family.